Welcome to Tailoring Talk with Roberto. Revilla. By day, I help people by activating their hidden superpowers with the clothing I tailor for them. By night, I'm a podcaster, continuing that desire to help as many people as I can through the conversations I tailor with my guests. Self-starters and creators who share their journeys, the highs and lows, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Please support the show by subscribing, and it also helps so much if you take a few seconds to rate and review. Today's guest is a Walt Disney historian and the author of two best-selling books, The Wisdom of Walt and Life Lessons from Walt. Known as Dr. Disneyland, he teaches the world's only accredited college course on the history of Disneyland. Why? Because he sees the parks not just as an escape, but an example of how to make your own dreams come true. He's also the survivor of not one, but two brain tumors. He loves ice cream and traveling. Tailoring Talk is here to teach us how to slay our challenges like a hero. Please welcome Jeff Barnes to the Tailoring Talk show. Jeff, how are you?
I am awesome. And how are you, Roberto?
I'm great. I'm so excited. And I was smiling so much through that introduction. And then suddenly I couldn't contain it. Because one thing that always comes up on every single episode is my guests will say to me, I'll give an analogy and they'll tell me how visceral it is and how they could really picture what I was thinking. And I always say to them, the inside of my head is like Disney World.
Wow.
It's like a Disney movie inside here. And that's how I think. I think in animated motion pictures, and that's how I process pretty much everything that I need to think about.
I love it. Yeah. What I love about that is, the whole idea of a Disneyland, which ultimately morphed into Disney World and the other parks around the globe today, started when Walt took his young daughters, Diane and Sharon, to Griffith Park in downtown LA. They would ride the merry-go-round. He would sit on a bench. And while sitting on that bench, his imagination got sparked, and he began to dream of a place where the parents and the children could have fun together. And, we think it's money that is the currency of the 21st century. It's our ideas. It's our imagination. It's what's kicking around in your head. And the way we move the world forward is by believing in those ideas, having the courage to get up of our proverbial park bench and take action, even if we have to slay dragons along the way. And Walt slayed dragon after dragon after dragon, even when it came to Disneyland, because despite the success of Mickey Mouse, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and everything else that came before, nobody believed in Disneyland, to include his own wife and his own brother. And people thought it was going to be bankrupt, shuttered, and forgotten in 6 months or less. So use your imagination, believe in your ideas, and take action to see how you can change the world.
Oh my God, we're done. That's it. Episode wrapped up. Thank you so much. That's the shortest
episode.
Walt,
we're just getting started, my friend.
No, exactly. No, absolutely. Oh my God, there are so many. There's so much that I want to talk to you about and have a conversation with you about. And, when it comes to Disney, it's when I think back through my own life as well, my first experiences I remember when my mum took me to the cinema, and the first movie I ever saw in theaters was Bambi.
Wow.
When I was about 7 years old. So it was a reissue around kind of like probably in like the mid 80s.
Yep.
And, those old hand-drawn animations, I mean, obviously I'd seen other, like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and all that, so a lot of those other kind of old films before. But the first time actually seeing that work on a big screen, and everything seems bigger when you're small, right?
Yeah.
It just really just grabbed my hold of my imagination and got its fingers right inside my brain and mind. And I grew up. It wasn't the easiest childhood, and so I spent a lot of time on my own, and I had to go inside myself quite a bit. And when I was left with books to read and so on that didn't have pictures, I had to, I would immediately, as I was reading, just make the whole thing up in my head, the visuals and stuff. I remember reading the full novelization of Pete's Dragon
Mm.
And it was so strange that the first time I saw the actual motion picture, I felt like I'd already seen what I was seeing on the screen because I pretty much imagined it as it was. It's my brain's
Yeah.
always worked like that. And maybe that's why, inevitably I found my way into doing what I do for a living.
No, I think that's awesome. And, one of the keys to success is not just having the idea or even taking action on the idea, but being able to visualize the end goal, the end product, the final step in whatever current journey, that you're on. And, Walt did a great job with that, in terms of having a vision, using that vision to inspire, the people around him. And he dreamed of Disneyland for like 20 years
Yeah.
before it actually came, to fruition. But having, that vivid imagination, having the courage to take action, believing in yourself, and knowing that you're going to accomplish it no matter what. And Walt's wife Lily once said she had never seen Walt beaten at anything, which I think is an amazing testament. Because here's an individual 100 years ago this week, the man went bankrupt at age 21. And it was the bankruptcy that propelled him to board a train with $40 single suitcase, one-way ticket, come to California, form a second studio with his older brother Roy. And then his first successful cartoon character was not Mickey Mouse. Walt once said, never forget, it all started with a mouse. Well, Walt wasn't being 100% truthful there. It really started with a rabbit, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. And he would lose that rabbit in a contract dispute with Universal. And it was that loss, that failure, that disappointment that forced him to come up with Mickey Mouse. So again, whether it's a bankruptcy, whether it's the disappointment in a relationship, in this case, his relationship with Universal, his distributor, or even, people in your life and in your world who don't believe in you, you can still leverage that to level up and achieve your goal and see your dreams come true.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to get into your origin story. I should tell the listeners actually, Jeff is calling in today from Florida. So another new what do you call yourselves in Florida? Floridians? No,
Floridians.
that's not
So
right.
I actually grew up in the panhandle of Florida, but I currently live in Southern California.
Ah,
So,
okay.
yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, Southern. I
No,
got
that's
see.
fine.
It's because I got my Disney World and Disneyland mixed up, and then I got where like Southern Florida and Southern California mixed up. I mean, anyway, I'm so
Well,
sorry.
I know
Southern
you've been to
California,
I know you've been to Walt Disney World. I want to invite you to Southern California and let me take you on a tour of Disneyland, which is the
definitely.
only Disney park that Walt ever actually walked in. He died 6 months before they broke ground in Florida.
Wow.
And I love Walt Disney World, but Disneyland is my home, and Disneyland has my heart.
Yeah. No, I bet. We are definitely planning a trip to the West Coast. Because I've never been further west than I think probably maybe Boston. So I've
Oh,
done
wow.
East Coast, obviously, because I've done Florida and New
Yeah.
York and Boston, and not really got much further than that. So we're definitely planning that, and I will definitely
We would
be
welcome you.
pestering you. Um, so um, let's talk about you for a second. Let's because we want to get to know you.
Sure.
And you have had your fair share of dragons to slay throughout your life. By the way, I was born in the year of the dragon. I have my dragon tattoos symbolizing rebirth and so on. So I'm always slightly hesitant to use dragons as an analogy for something that's bad, but anyway, we'll go with it. Um, when so just take us back to young Jeff. Um, and and kind of give us a kind of flavor of what you were like as a youngster and sort of how you came to be this amazing human being that you are today.
Well, I had it was probably similar to you, difficult childhood. Dad was absent a lot, eventually completely left altogether. Mom was a phenomenal storyteller, which I think is where I got that ability. And went to Walt Disney World for the first time when I was 10 years old, back in August of 1974. The second I stepped on Main Street, I'm like, oh my goodness, if there really is a heaven on this side of breathing, this has got to be it. And so from then until I graduated high school, like if there was ever an opportunity to go back to Walt Disney World, I was all in. I was the most excited. Just absolutely could not wait. Graduated college and moved west. I always had this dream of living in California. Was up in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is like 8 hours north of LA, and finally had a chance to go to Los Angeles, i.e. Disneyland, for the first time in 1988. And I was so looking forward to it. And we got there, and I was just so underwhelmed and so disappointed, partly because of my memories as a child. Disneyland's significantly smaller. And of course, because I was younger, that made Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom even bigger to me. Now I'm an adult, Disneyland smaller. It was going to look smaller to me regardless, because I had grown up by that point. But I think most importantly, I had no clue what I was doing. So I stumbled into the park at like 11 a.m. on a Sunday morning in August. I want to do the newest, latest, greatest attraction, which happened to be Star Tours. I knew that was in Tomorrowland, but I soon found out the ride might be in Tomorrowland, but the line started all the way back at the beginning of Main Street, USA. It took 3 hours for my first Disneyland attraction. And by the time we got out of there, the park was just mobbed. It was hot. There was nothing about that first experience that I liked. And if you had said, oh, by the way, 35 years from now, you are only ever going to be doing Disney/Disneyland stuff, I would have said, you're absolutely nuts.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine if some, dark stranger in a hat just kind of came up to you out of the blue and said, hey, kid, I know how you're feeling right now, but in 35 years, you're going to be known as Dr. Disneyland.
There's
You're
no
going to
way.
be the world's leading authority on everything Disney.
There's no
You're going
way.
to be teaching a college course on Disney. You'd have been like,
no way.
Get out of here.
Yeah. But I ended up staying in California and just kept hearing from the locals who just loved it with a passion I had never seen before. And so I'm insatiably curious. And Walt once talked about the 4 C's of success. And those 4 C's are courage, confidence, consistency, and curiosity. And in getting curious, I discovered Walt had a difficult childhood, an impoverished childhood, more failures than successes. And he built Disneyland for the purpose of telling stories that challenge you, Roberto, challenge me, challenge our listeners today to then go out and live our own great story. And I was really moved and motivated by that. Couldn't wait to go back again and see the park through Walt's eyes and through the lens of storytelling, and just absolutely fell in love. And in fact, I said, when I got home, this was in the summer of 1991, I declared I'm going to write a book on Disneyland one day. I had no idea what that meant, and I had no clue how to do it. But I remember specifically telling friends, I'm going to write a Disneyland book one day.
Wow. So so you're in your late 20s, mid to late 20s by this time?
Mid to late 20s. And it would be, it would be, gosh, almost 30 years before I got around to actually doing what I had declared in 1991. And what had to happen for me, and I think this is true for a lot of people, I had to face the greatest conflict of my life, which was being diagnosed with a life-threatening brain tumor. And following the surgery, which was successful, by the way, spoiler alert, I lived. I then decided, I don't care that I don't know how to do it. I don't care that I don't know how to publish it. I don't care if anyone buys it or not. This is sort of my life's calling. I'm tired of thinking about it. It's time to take action on it.
Yeah.
And what had been a 25 year in my head idea I managed to finish in 142 days.
Wow.
So I want to say at this point, if you or any of our listeners are facing a difficulty, facing an adversity, facing a challenge, facing conflict right now, understand it's conflict that makes for a great story. It's not the happily ever after ending that we typically pursue. It's conflict. Every great story requires conflict. So reframe how you see your current situation. Understand that you're in your own great story and leverage that conflict to your next success or to your next level in life.
Yeah, absolutely. What was the oh God, okay, now I'm skipping ahead because so hang on. Okay, let's stay where we are right now. So what was the process having just come through what must have been an awful experience, finding out at such a young age that you have this thing inside your head that could kill you? Coming through that, thank you, God, the universe, whatever you believe in, for giving us the gift of you. And then deciding to just cut the chains and just go for your goal. What was the process of writing that book like for you?
I look back on that, and it was a truly spiritual, out of body type experience. I mean, first of all, I made the decision, and it was one of those. And I go back to Walt 100 years ago, following the bankruptcy. He boarded that train, and he did it with the intention of going all in on his dream. And so he boarded that train with $40, a single suitcase, and a one-way ticket. He was not coming back to Kansas City. And for me, it was like I'm all in on this. Like I have faced my own mortality for the first time ever. I don't care if I fail. I don't care if I can't figure this out. I don't care if anybody buys it. I have to do this. And I hired a writing coach, which looking back on, I didn't really need. But the writing coach was kind of like Dumbo's feather. Dumbo could always fly, but he needed the feather to convince himself that he could fly, right?
Yeah.
I hired this writing coach who turned out to be my equivalent of Dumbo's feather. And I made a daily commitment. This goes back to Walt and consistency. I made a commitment of I'm going to write 333 words every single day without fail until this book is done. And as a result of that, again, we were able to finish it in 142 days, because there were days when I wrote more than 333, but never days where I wrote less. But then secondly, and this is the power of showing up for your goal, showing up for your dream. I was blown away by some of the ideas that came to me that I had no clue what were ever going to be in the book. So, for example, each chapter ends with a souvenir stop, which is sort of a mini workbook for the reader to go through and connect with their story, with their goals, their dreams, and how that particular chapter's content relates to them. And then each chapter ended with what I call a hand stamp story, where we go back and take a particularly poignant story and use it to have an emotional impact on whatever the lesson or content is. Readers absolutely love that. And I didn't come up with that idea till I was about halfway through the writing process. And then I think the third chapter of the book is about the power of your alter ego, leaning into your second or shadow self. And I was going to use that chapter to talk about Mickey Mouse and Walt's relationship to Mickey, and how Mickey was always seen as Walt Disney's alter ego. Well, in the middle of the night, one night, I just woke up. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. And I realized that all I had to do was add a W to alter. And now we're not talking about listening to your alter ego. You're talking about listening to your Walter ego.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh my God. Like, and I would love to say I was smart enough to sit down and, do that, in a pre-planned sort of fashion. That's not the way creativity works. You have to show up. And when you show up, the inspiration, the motivation, the muse shows up. If you wait for motivation, if you wait for inspiration, if you wait for the muse, you're going to be waiting until you are dead. So get started, show up, the rest will follow.
Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to ask you takes us back in the conversation about 5 minutes, and I apologize.
That's okay.
I love listening to you talk. Uh, okay, so you hated Disney kind of the first time you went as an adult.
Correct.
Lengthy queues, we all know that. We have theme parks over here, not as good as Disney World or Disneyland, but still. We all know the drill, especially in summer when it's hot and it's sweaty, and you have to wait for like 3 to 3.5 hours for what then amounts to be barely a 2-minute experience. And then if you want to do it again, you've got to do all of that again.
Yep.
You go back again, having leaned into curiosity, read up on Walt's story, how the parks came into being and so on, and what his vision and his intention for them were. But when you go back, it's still the same 3-hour queues. It's still that same horrible experience that we all hate. So what was it what was the lens that changed how you saw it?
Well,
because you were obviously looking past all of that.
yeah. So there's two pieces to that. First of all, I also did enough research to learn the importance of being there early. I mean, how many things are better in life when you start earlier, whether it's finishing your education, investing in your retirement, paying off your house. I learned the importance and the power of quote unquote starting early. So, when you're at a Disney park for what is referred to as rope drop, meaning, the opening or the start of the day, you're an hour and a half to 2 hours ahead of most people who usually are going to show up around 10 or 11 a.m. So I had the place to myself. I could go and do whatever I wanted with virtually no lines. And then, in conjunction with that, read up and discovered that if you take the park in a certain order, you can almost eliminate the lines. So, I've never lost my patience. If for no other reason, Roberto, you can't lose what you don't have. I'm not a patient person, and so I managed to calm the chaos that people associate with Disney parks or with any amusement park by figuring out how to show up early, do the attractions in a certain order so that you're ahead of the lines and don't get stuck for another hour or 3-hour wait. And then secondly, the power of details. Walt was this amazing visionary, but he was also smart enough to know that at the end of the day, it's the details that the guests are going to notice, and you're never going to pick up on all of the details. And so wanting to see the next thing that you missed is what brings people back to the park over and over and over again. And I, started looking for like the windows on Main Street, which are like credits rolling in a movie where Walt is saying thank you to the people that helped make his dream for Disneyland possible, or the manner in which Main Street USA is like the opening scene in a movie or the closing shot at the end of a movie. Everybody goes in the same way, everybody goes out the same way. But once you get to the central hub in front of the castle, Walt's not going to micromanage. I mean, who amongst us ever wants to be micromanaged? No one. He's going to let us go, and we get to pick our own story. We get to pick our own adventure. We get to pick our own channel, whether it's Fantasyland, Tomorrowland, Frontierland, or Adventureland, the original 4 lands, in the park. Are one of my favorite details. There's a light bulb at the end of Main Street that's half red and half white. And the reason for that is it's an odd-shaped space, and so it required an odd number of light bulbs. But Walt wanted an even number of red and white light bulbs. This bothered him so much that one night he went to the maintenance yard, grabbed his own bucket of paint, his own paintbrush, painted the last light bulb half red, half white. And Disney keeps that light bulb half red and half white to this day in a tribute to Walt. But again, it's a reminder of the importance of paying attention to the details. Walt knew every blade of grass in Disneyland. It was the toy he never had as a kid.
Yeah.
And it was going to be as perfect as possible in his eyes.
Yeah. Wow. So let's move on to slaying our challenges like dragons. No, slaying our challenges like a hero.
Yeah.
Because you very early on in the conversation, you talked about, vision, goal. In a business context, I'm sure everybody's listening has been through the whole vision goal thing and so on, and you've done various workshops and that sort of stuff. But I think the way that you're about to kind of take us through your approach to it, using Disney principles or whatever, is going to be quite refreshing and like super exciting for someone like me, who again, it's a whole Disney thing up in studio up in here. Because for me, when I think of it like that, it's almost I go back to when I first went to Disney Land, World, Disney World. My room was so this was probably 13 years ago.
Okay. So
And I'd never been before because my parents couldn't afford to take us on holidays and all that kind of stuff. And so we were in what I was told was like the older part of the resort. But when I got up into my room, looking out the window, I could see the castle, the one that comes up at the beginning.
The Cinderella Castle.
I call it the Buena Vista Castle because that's what always came up at the start of the movie.
Were you staying at the Contemporary Resort?
No idea.
Was it a concrete A-frame with the monorail going through it?
Yes. It had the monorail. Yeah.
So you were at the Contemporary Resort.
Okay, cool. But yeah, looking out my window, I could see the castle in the distance, like framed by my window. I mean, how awesome was that? I had like the best view, and that has become so many times my kind of analogy of I'm here, then there's a lot of land and there's forests and there's mountains and there's
swamps and lakes
and rivers of lava and whatever sometimes, but there where the castle is in the distance, that's my goal. That's where I need to get to.
Love it.
Yeah. Does that kind of lean into your kind of approach to slaying challenges in relation to vision goals, where you want to get to in life and so on?
Yeah, like I think the true testament to a leader is the ability to cast a vision. And so in that instance, it's the vision or the goal of getting to the castle, which is far off in the distance. But then secondly, how do you know that you're a leader in business? How do you know that you're a leader anywhere, even if it's your own family? You know that you're a vision, you know that you're a leader, not based on title, position, power, authority, where you rank in the org chart. Walt Disney hated organizational charts. You know that you're a leader if and when you have followers. And it's that vision. Hey, team, we're here. We need to get to there. Here's the vision for why. And then people are so inspired, people are so motivated that they can't wait to follow you and get to that vision that you've cast, that goal that you have created. Walt Disney's greatest strength was as a storyteller. He's still remembered in Hollywood as Hollywood's best storyteller. But then I think, secondly, he may have been the world's best HR director. And what I mean by that is Walt wasn't super talented at anything specifics, even as an animator. He would hire great animators like Ub Iwerks, who really was responsible for, all of Mickey's accomplishments. He wasn't a great Imagineer. The only Disney attraction that was designed by Walt is Tom Sawyer Island. Walt's true gift was A, having the vision, B, the storytelling abilities to use that vision to motivate and inspire. But then third, he hired really, really, really well. And he wasn't afraid to hire people he knew was better than him, because they took him to places he could never get to on his own. And so again, you need to have that vision. But in addition to that, you also have to recognize chances are you're not going to get to your goal. You're not going to get to your vision alone. So how are you sharing that vision in an inspirational, motivational way? And how are you leading yourself, and how are you leading your team in a fashion that causes people to rally around you and they can't wait to follow you? I've had the privilege of interviewing Disney legends who were hired by Walt himself. And here we are, 55 years after Walt's passing in December of 1966. And I'll ask them on a stage in front of hundreds, if not thousands, of Disney fans, what was it like for you the day that Walt Disney died? To a person, not one of them has ever been able to answer, because they get so broken up. It's so emotional. These are grown men crying 55 plus years after the fact. That's the power and the influence Walt had on these individuals early in their life and early in their career. And it's because he was a phenomenal leader and, cast that vision. So again, you've got to believe in what you're trying to achieve, and you've got to believe in it so hard that people know you're going to get there, and you have the ability to take them with you.
Yeah. Like every great story that's ever been told, right?
Correct. And along the way, like, buckle up, because you're going to overcome obstacles. You're going to face adversity. There's going to be challenge after challenge after challenge. You have to embrace conflict. When Walt came home and said to his wife, Lily, honey, we're going to build an amusement park, her immediate reaction was, oh, Walt, no. She wanted nothing to do with it. He says to his older brother, Roy, who's been his business partner since 1923, Roy, buddy, we're going to build an amusement park. And Roy was like, you've had some great ideas in your day, Walt. We're not building an amusement park. And yet, the first person to spend the first $1, that's what it cost to get into Disneyland back in 1955. First person to spend the first $1 to purchase the first ticket to get into Disneyland was Walt Disney's older brother, Roy. Because Walt was such a phenomenal leader, he eventually got Roy to come around, so much so that Roy buys the first ticket, even though his initial response was not happening. Walt knew no simply means next option.
Yeah. It's having that conviction in your belief. So many times I've been told no in my life, but I would never have got to where I got to. I always use another analogy of, if we're in an airplane and they were giving the parachute briefing, but also giving all of the, this could happen, that could happen. I'd already be halfway out the plane. You'd be looking out the doors and I'd be shouting back at you, Jeff, come, we got to figure this out on the way down, but let's just get on with it, right?
Well, and that's the key. I think a lot of people want everything figured out before they ever get started. Walt said the best way to get something done is to stop talking,
just
and start
get on with it.
And you figure it out along the way. One of the most valuable pieces of art in the Disney archives is the original drawing of Disneyland, which is a great story behind it, that was done in September of 1952. And you'll recognize elements in that drawing that made its way into the park. There are other pieces of that drawing that never saw the light of day. Who cares? Get started.
Awesome. Oh my God, Jeff, thank you so much. You've been everything that I was expecting, hoping for, and much, much more. Like, I could spend hours and hours talking to you. So for everybody listening that wants to connect you, they should definitely head over to your website,
Please.
thewisdomofwalt.com.
Yes.
Both of your books are available on Amazon and all other good bookstores, I presume.
Absolutely.
So
Yep.
Waterstone's over here, Barnes and Noble, and I can't think of any other American bookstores names, but all over the place. And they can also sign up for your course, also book you for keynotes and so on. And then you've been doing quite a lot of work on the blog. You're going to be doing something really special for that. So people, if you do head over to Jeff's site, you must sign up for the blog. Yep. Tell me what you're up to with that.
Well, thank you, Roberto. So every Wednesday, I issue a Wednesdays with Walt email, which is inspirational, motivational, sharing a story from Walt's life, a story from the parks, maybe something that's going on in terms of current event. But at the end of the email, I connect it to you, your story, whatever challenge you might be facing. And it's 100% free. So all you have to do is go to the website, under resources, you'll see blog, you can sign up, and every single Wednesday, you'll get a piece of inspiration, motivation, Disney history, fun facts, trivia, what have you. And it's become so popular that I have a publisher who wants to take 52 of the best ones. They're all great, by the way, but 52 of the best ones, put it in a compilation, and that will be the first edition of Wednesdays with Walt, available in bookstores in early of 2024. Currently, you can get the content 100% for free, but eventually it will be available for purchase in this compilation. And what I love about Wednesdays with Walt, not only is it the type of writing I have always wanted to do, but the whole idea behind Wednesdays is, before we had Disney Imagineering, we actually had a company that Walt formed in 1952 called WED, which stood for Walter Elias Disney. So the first three letters in Wednesday is, guess what? WED. And again, founded in 1952. There's 52 Wednesdays in a year. So there's a lot of symmetry there. And I want to use the origin of Disney Imagineering to spark your imagination and hopefully keep you inspired and motivated every single week.
I'm signing up straight after we get off this call. You can guarantee that. Jeff, I'll make sure I have all of that in the show notes as well. I ask every guest this. Jeffrey, have you had fun today?
Oh, absolutely. No, this has been amazing.
Thank you so much. And thank you all so much for joining Jeffrey and I on this episode. Don't forget, Tailoring Talk is on Instagram at Tailoring Talk Podcast for episode updates. And I love feedback. So email me at tailoringtalkpodcast@gmail.com. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review. And you can also click the share button in your player to send this episode on to people you know who might get some help or be inspired by what Jeff has shared with us today. And if you're enjoying Tailoring Talk and want to support the show, you can buy me a coffee, link in the show notes. Have a great week. Be good to each other, and I'll see you on the next one.